Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code, OmniPoke. For today's video, I'm back with Emily. She's still having her extended trip from the EUIC here in London. And we actually managed to watch the Pokemon Presents as well. It was just the other day. A lot of interesting news for all sorts of games, but the TCG got a big drop in that Mega Evolution EXs, are coming back. And it's a new Mega Evolution rule to the previous one that we have seen in the TCG. And me and Emily both have quite different experiences with the TCG, in that I've an old head, been around a lot longer. So I think we had quite different reactions initially. So we're also going to sort of talk about all of that and do a quick little run through of how these mechanics have been in the past, I think.
Sure, yeah. I'm really excited to talk because I was streaming the Pokemon Presents, and as most people do, right, they watch the announcement, they're kind of done. And then they go to check Twitter, and Twitter is absolutely on fire. And for me, I kind of started my Pokemon journey while V-Stars, VMAXs were kind of all the craze, and it was, Mew VMAX was like that very solid 3-prizer attacker. And it's like, okay, another, for me at least, right, for the person who started playing post-COVID, it's like, all right, another 3-prizers coming in. I mean, the rest of the VMAXs are rotating out at this point, right? So it's like, all right, this isn't a big deal to me. You go on Twitter and everybody is freaking out, and I'm excited to kind of hear Joe's history on this because, as he said, he's been playing since Fossil, apparently.
I am a fossil. Yeah.
But I'm excited for this because, I mean, the two cards that we have in front of us, I mean, Gardy looks insane.
Yeah, we'll talk about those in a bit more detail towards the end of the video, just sort of how they'll fit in with at least the cards we know, but of course we don't know half of the new cards from this set, but still we can already look towards some synergies that these cards have and how they can be powerful. But really, we're going to start by talking about the mechanics of these cards. So some big differences from these Mega Evolutions to the old Mega EXs. We do not need Spirit Links in order to evolve these. The Spirit Links were previously tool cards that you had to put on the basic EX, and then either you would end your turn by Mega Evolving, which is terrible, by the way, or you Spirit Link up, then you forego the end of turn rule as you evolve. So you had to do this extra weird step, not just a normal Stage 1 evolution, which was quite bad mechanically, I think. So we don't have to worry about that with these Megas, which is good. You instead evolve from a Riolu straight into a Mega Lucario. So you don't have to go Riolu, Lucario, then Mega. You go Riolu instantly into a Mega, and same for Curlier straight into Gardevoir. So we go from 1 prize Pokemon to 3 prize Pokemon immediately, which is also a big step up, and also something that will compare from these other ones back in the day. So those are the key differences. These are 3 prize Pokemon now as well, which is very different to old Megas. I do just have a few ready to rumble just to look at how they were comparatively back in the day. So Megas in the XY era, this is a Furious Fists Mega Lucario EX. It had 220 hit points, and basic EXs had about 170, 180 hit points, that sort of threshold. So you're getting a little bit of help with the hit points there. Normally stay out of range of the big one-hit KO stuff for the most part. Sometimes Night March would still reach there, and Lucario was never a playable card anyway, so don't worry about this card from a playability standpoint. It was weak to Psychic, and Night March was the best deck, so there's never so much play. The regular Lucario is actually pretty good, but and the one thing about all of the Megas back in this era is that some of them had traits, but none of them had abilities, and they only ever added 1 attack to the card. And also when you evolve up, just like regular evolution, you can't use any of the things on the lower stages of the Mega. Right. So these are, I think, really poor mechanically. Back in the day, these were 2 prize Pokemon, they needed Spirit Links, and they only gave you access to a bit more hit points and 1 attack. So really boring, really limited, not great mechanically. 1 or 2 of them were quite playable. I think Rayquaza was one of the most notable Megas back in the day. Manectric, one of the more notable ones as well. That was mostly because of its type coverage, but also added acceleration. So I didn't love the initial Mega Evolutions, but they are very, very different. But I think the main thing to note is that these didn't increase the amount of prizes that were given up. They were just 2 prizes back in the day, and that means that we're also going to have to talk about some of these other 3 prize Pokemon back in the day. Right. All happy with these 2 prize ones?
It's very interesting to see that once they Mega Evolve, the turn ends. I think that's for us, right, for the post-COVID generation of Pokemon players, that has not been a thing, right? So they've completely gotten rid of that. And I know we're going to jump back to the new cards eventually, but to be able to have access to some of those mega moves already, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. So when XY base was first announced, they didn't have Spirit Links at all.
Right.
So the first batch of megas, apart from I think Kangaskhan, which was just about playable enough, all of them tanked. They did nothing. They were not playable at all because that rule is backbreaking. Like ending a turn without attacking, like midway through the game, just doesn't work.
Right.
Like you could do it maybe on turn 2.
Right.
But every other turn of the game, you can't do that. So the Spirit Links were introduced to try and make that a thing. I also had a personal gripe that it was always the individual Pokemon plus Spirit Link, because then every booster set that came out, there was just like more Spirit Links of like a Gardevoir, a Gallade, and that sort of thing. And if they just printed a Mega Stone tool card, it could have gone on anything. It also improves deck building, because then we could have had multiple Megas. So I still can't believe that design choice. It was these Megas were, and that's the thing, because they restricted themselves to just one attack for everything.
Right.
We're like losing so much creativity, and that's already at least one thing that we have to give credit for these Megas, is that already, yes, we're only seeing attacks so far, but you know, they're treating them as a full card, and they're gonna likely have abilities and attacks. So they're not doing the same gimmick. By the way, the gimmick was that in Japanese they had an English text of the attack name.
Yep.
And
I used to collect these cards
actually
when I first started playing.
All right, let's start looking at the 3 prize Pokemon then, because that's what really most people are afraid of. They don't care that it's a Mega necessarily. They care that it gives up 3 prize cards. And like you said, VMAXs have pretty much only just gone out for like rotation and whatnot. I think we still have some in form. Actually, we have
Regieleki. He's still in, I believe.
So it's not like we're not living in a world with 3 prizes, but it's also something that people easily point to as like, these are bad times in the game because these things give up 3 prize cards. So what's been your like initial impression on like the 3 prize debate that you've seen so far?
I think it's so interesting because I don't know if this is just an internet thing. It's just not one person seems happy. Like not one person seems happy. Like I said, I started playing like kind of during the time where my first deck was Arceus and Inteleon, and it's like Mew VMAX was always the problem, right? So I'm basing a lot of my opinions based off of the like one deck that I played. I mean, of course, like Rapid Strike Urshifu winning NAIC 2023, but like for me, my kind of experience with the game has been like, okay, let's get these 3 prizers down as fast as possible.
Yeah.
But you're gonna talk about it soon that they're not gonna go down too easy anymore.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they're going to be massive. And I think Mew was a really interesting case in that they had already had a lot of dark Pokemon in the format that were relevant, that could easily one-hit KO them.
Right.
So it was really important for them to have that. And Mew wasn't good because it was a 3-prizer. Mew was good because of its draw engine being absurd, right? And it had all the support cards. So, like, Mew was good for a myriad of reasons, not that it just gave up 3 prize cards. Because a lot of the reason why 3 prize card Pokemon are good is that all the resources you put into one guy, if that guy sticks on the board, it means you don't need those resources in the next turn. So you play off the board a lot more than playing off of the hand.
Sure.
And in this game, like over the last couple sets, we've had to constantly play off the hand. Every deck uses Fez, every deck like gets punished by Iono, that sort of thing, or like Pidgeot or whatever. You need stuff on board as well as your attackers to keep playing the game turn by turn, because everyone's taking KOs like pretty much routinely, one way or another. Whereas the tag teams, unless you're hitting for weaknesses, normally stuck on the board for a turn or two, outside of like, you know, 1 or 2 cases where you could, you know, reach for damage output. But the tag team era definitely gets hated. Like, a lot of people don't like tag team Pokemon. I've only put Gardevoir on here, not like it was the best one in the time, just because, you know, we have Gardevoir now as a 3-prizer again. But, yeah, these were around like 240 to 280 hit points, that sort of range. I think some maybe got to 290 or something. But these were all basic Pokemon. The GX mechanic that was interesting with tag teams is they all have this plus in the attack cost. So what I actually really liked about this tag team design was that you could do these attacks for their minimum required use that still had an upside, right? So Kaleidostorm is 150 damage. You could just choose to do 200 on a turn for the same attack cost as your normal attack.
Oh, interesting.
But if you choose to do the plus elements, where you go all the way up to 6 energy, then you have this devastating option here where you shuffle your opponent's hand back into your deck. I think Pikarom is like the most notable one that you can think of, where you get that additional crazy snipe, which normally means you're taking like 4 prizes in a turn. I really liked that option because there were times, certainly I remember Charizard mostly, Reshizard doing, sometimes you would just flip the V-Star marker for 200 because 200 was good enough if you do it fast enough versus the 300 later on in the game. That was like a real in-game decision that was really important, how you utilize that GX attack. I think GXs generally were just like a good mechanic. I personally don't hate so another thing to note about the tag teams is they were all basics, right?
Right.
The GXs meant that the game became, or the tag teams meant that the game became very basic centric.
Sure.
All of the format then became like, you've got your handful of tag team Pokemon, a handful of support Pokemon. Let's go, because we can have and especially some decks utilized Green's engines where you've just had literally one attacker as your tag team and then like a setup single prizer.
Interesting.
Because of how prize mapping works, right? Where you can give up a 1 or 2 single prizes and then still make them take out 2 3 prize Pokemon. And I think that's one of the fears of Megas generally coming back, and 3 prizes coming back, is that how that affects our prize maps and how deck building changes just based on that, in that you can now, it's quite likely that like say a quad Lucario deck could work, knowing that you can feed your opponent like a Riolu, then a single prize Lucario, and then give them 2 megas afterwards, and it's like, I have to still get through 8 prize cards worth of stuff here, and it's so grim. That's what the tag team format was like very frequently about. And that's even with a lot of one-hit KO in the format. The other thing to note is that whenever things give up 3 prize cards, weakness becomes way more integral.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we go from having like 50-50s or 60-40s in the format, where you can have this like difficult exchange, your opponent can uptrade via weakness at times, but you're probably still going to have a number of 2 prizes on the board. Whereas now, if they just uptrade into you once, that's such a huge advantage, thanks to weakness, that we're going to have lots more 70-30s, I think, just based on weakness alone, and that's like not fun, right? You hate flipping over your opening basic and being like, this is going to be an uphill battle from the very start of the game. And I think inherently 3 prize Pokemon, not just tag teams, they do that. And I've always been a sympathizer for tag teams. I loved I loved tag call and the tag team supporters. That's kind of why I liked tag teams the most. But I also thought that like inherently they weren't the worst, and because you have an all basic strategy and like all of the strategies were around basics at the time, it was quite a consistent format. Like everyone would get into the game. So I don't hate tag teams, but I also very much understand why people did, and it creates quite a simplistic deck building approach and quite simplistic strategies generally. So at least we have to give a nod to the new Megas, is that they're still evolution lines, and there's going to be a combination of adding in 3 prizes in like so we're going to have 1, 2, and 3 prizes all in one deck, which is a big deal compared to tag teams. So at least we've dodged that bullet. And then VMAXs, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with now because they're still in our format, but we're evolving from a 2 prizer into a 3 prizer, and again we just gained often just like an attack, sometimes like 2 attacks. I can't think of many VMAXs that had more. I know Eternatus had an ability and an attack. There was a few things out there, like all people had some things. Yeah, Kyurem had an ability and attack. They weren't that like versatile or that powerful outside of like the flagship ones that were. I think the main gripe people had with VMAXs is that a lot of them were very similar just in their own type. So like Ice Rider was basically the same as Victini. They were 2 energy attacks that did basically the same amount of damage, but with just different colours basically. And Eternatus was a 2 energy attacker that did the same thing. You just had to do your bench, right? So every game that you would go second against, like you were playing a VMAX, your opponent's playing a VMAX, you go second, they get to turn attach, you get to turn attach, they get to evolve, attach, KO, they're 2 prizes up, then the guy you were meant to use to kill their guy is knocked out already. And that was just terrible. And it meant that Crushing Hammer became like a staple in the format because... yeah, like there was no defense for your opponent going first, which I think is just so crazy. And in the format right now, going second is probably premium in like the majority of decks. So it's a really weird interaction that we had to choose to go first in the game just to get an energy drop on a guy, and then energy drop again next turn, and that was just what we had to do in VMAX versus VMAX matchups. And I think that was the biggest criticism of this 3 prize format. You still have the same issues of like weakness being a big problem. And these also like weren't the most complex cards. I think like Mew is just like 2 attacks written on the card. The complexity comes from the stuff that it like yoinks, right? So again, at the moment, I think this is better. I also prefer evolving from 1 prizes than 2 prizes. That was one of the big issues because. That same issue of like if you've gone second, you're just losing Rolts, right? And it's like you can still play the game there, and you can still get the initial hit on their bigger guy, rather than being like, I've lost a third of my prize cards, and the only thing I've been powering up, that sucks. So I think already, even though there's a lot of heat around Megas, I prefer them certainly to VMAXs. they have benefits and weaknesses to tag teams.
Sure.
But they're way better than old megas. So new megas, I think, are in that tier list, like either the top rung or just below tag teams. And people are going to roast me for saying I like tag teams the most out of all of these mechanics, but I think VMAXs were awful, and I think most people agree with that. And old megas were just like kind of bad. Like they weren't game-breakingly bad, but because they just stayed as 2 prizes, they just weren't interesting, or they just weren't fun. Whereas I think new megas are going to be a good combination of like potentially interesting because they're not limited. So far, we've only seen attacks, but it looks like they're not trying to limit themselves like they did with old megas.
Right.
We're not falling from that trap of like having to go towards a more basic format, and we're not falling for the trap of having to do like all stage 1s that all do the same thing but just in different types. So they have avoided a lot of the criticisms of old 3 prize Pokemon, I think.
Sure.
So for that sort of nuance, I think these are looking like much better designed cards. That said, though, there are still some fundamental issues with 3 prize Pokemon, and that comes back to the sort of mapping situation that we have to worry about. Any other thoughts on the 3 prizes and how they shape up with the old stuff? You knew VMAXs pretty well, right?
I hated VMAXs.
Yeah.
I hated them. I mean, like, right, so when I was coming into, like, playing this game, it was so much, like, it came into, like, hey, every Lightning player needs to go spend $30 on Regieleki VMAX right now, because Transistor is the best ability we've ever seen.
You got sold a lie.
Oh, I spent that $60 on 2 Regieleki VMAXs and instantly regretted it the week after.
Yeah.
I think for me personally, right, there's always going to be like all right, this Pokemon is big, how do we take care of it, versus I think it'll just come down to kind of a prize mapping thing of like understanding what your prize map is. I mean, the first thing I think I said to you was, "Amp you very much for 4 prizes sounds awesome," but it's certainly not gonna happen, especially losing Miraidon as we know it right now. But I don't know. I mean, like I said, like this wasn't like my era of time, right? I think a lot of people don't really care as much about the Mega as much as they care about 3 prizes, and I think you kind of delved into that pretty well.
Yeah, I think just looking at how our format is looking now that we're evolving from single prize Pokemon, I think a lot of people are going to think a natural prize map is going to be take out one of the evolving guys or like 2 of the little evolving guys, take out a support Pokemon, whether it's Fez, Mew, Squawkabilly EX, one of those like, you know, setup basics that help you draw cards, and then deal with 1 Mega with like 1 big attack that you have in your deck.
Right.
And that typically means you're going to also have a Mega in your deck, because these are all going to be really powerful, right? They give up 3 prizes, they're going to be big, but they're also going to have big like attacks, so they're going to be powerful. So that's going to be an interesting back and forth, but I also think because they're all evolving decks, it's not going to be the same issue that we had with tag teams of like, I'm going to throw you a 1 prizer. All right, you dealt with that. I'll throw you a 1 prizer. All right, you dealt with that. Here's 2 of my 3 prizes.
Good luck, kid.
I feel like there could be some evolutions trying to do that a little bit, but I don't think it's naturally as easy. And I think, again, because they're normally going to be evolving from much smaller things, stuff like spread damage is going to be like a much bigger deal. And we know that like Dustomar's in the format, Dragapult's in the format. That's going to still keep stuff in check a lot, I think. So my biggest concern of Megas is still just weakness being a bigger part player, because it's hard to cover your weaknesses in the game without completely warping your deck list. So
super fair.
That's the only like reservation I have on 3 prizes, I think. So far I'm like pretty much happy with everything else. That said, should we talk about these cards in a bit more detail and how they're going to do? So Mega Lucario is a stage 1 Pokemon, 340 hit points, gives up 3 prizes.
Oh boy.
It's got 2 attacks, Aura Jab for 1 fighting. It does 130 and attaches 3 basic fighting from your discard pile to your bench Pokemon in any way that you like. This is 30 damage less than Garchomp EX, which is a stage 2. And this is fighting typing, which is normally better because you cover more weaknesses, right?
Sure.
You catch lightning, you catch colorless, you catch a bunch of stuff. Like this KOs Pheasantipity very easily, for example. So there's a lot of things you can pick up. And obviously it's a stage 1, so it's much easier to do. And there are going to be situations where, because this has a very usable single energy attack that also has energy acceleration, straight away my alarm bells are ringing that this could easily be a Churro deck or a Scoop Up Cyclone based deck where you rely on that 340 bulk, you use your cheap effective stuff, you build up KOs for Mega Braves, and you also pick up your 3 prizer. And that's just like a huge headache to deal with, right?
I think just being the fact that you play a little Riolu on turn 1, you go first, right? Like, this would probably be one of the only decks that would want to go first, right? But also, then again, you can go second Arven TM Evolution, and then just have 2 340 HP Pokemon and say, have fun.
Yeah.
Like, that it's... To me, I think what bothers me the most, I think, is just how overtuned the hit points are, right? Like, especially for a stage 1. For a stage 1 to be 340. Like, the only cards that I can think of right now that take care of that easily is, for example, like Raging Bolt EX, right? But with Lily's Clefairy coming into format, which is a card that Mega Gardevoir EX is definitely going to play, right? That is the only deck that's going to be able to handle that like that. But the problem is that 340 is just not easy to hit all in one swing.
And also, I think what's interesting is that Aura Jab sets you up for the rest of the game.
Exactly.
Because, like, from there, the efficiency of just attaching for turn should be enough if you go quad Lucario. There is a single prize Lucario that can do 150 as a revenge attack.
Yes.
As well. So you can get creative with that, weave that in on a turn, like... Again, like we said, you can feed them a Riolu, you can feed them this one prize, and then you're still going with 2 Megas as your win con. So that feels like it probably will be a quad deck. If anything, if any Mega is going to be a quad, I think the one we've seen so far, Lucario, could easily literally be 4 Riolu, and, like, then just draw cards, which is kind of wild.
Draw supporters and
Lucario. We need some more discard synergy, but we're basically there. And Mega Brave is also pretty good. 270 is, like, not the number.
Right.
But we also know that there's, just to quickly scooch down, there is the Power Pro, so we are getting Electro Power back, but for fighting.
So that's 300.
So you can, so essentially Mega Brave should be reaching 1-hit KOs.
So you Arven turn 2 now for Ultra Ball if you can't find the TM Evo, and then, or you just Ultra Ball or you Arven for the I've been calling it the Gatorade.
Yeah.
Because it kind of looks like
Prem
it.
Power.
The Prem Power, and then you're hitting for 300.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, Lucario is a very, very good card. I think, like you said, if Lily's Clefairy is still going to be big as a tech attacker, that's what's relevant, right? It can be a nice tech attacker. I don't have to, like... I'm not terrified of this card, but I know that its internal stats are just quite silly.
Sure.
And then Gardevoir, I think this is more of just like we know the synergy is just plainly obvious in front of us.
So terrible. This is the one that I'm kind of having like my dooming feeling about, right? Is because you could probably find a line where you play like 2 regular Gardevoir EXs, 1 Mega Gardevoir EX, and then the Psychic Embrace just around, right? Like, as you were saying, we kind of see the writing on the wall of what this synergizes with. You send the damage back with, like, double Monkey Dory, and then it's just swinging for 1,000,000. It's not exactly, just for me, Gardevoir's a big pain. I'm not kind of excited to see how this one's gonna go, but, I mean, it just kind of makes sense.
It feels like this is like the old Zacian V that the Gardevoirs had to play.
Yeah.
Where you do like,
good times.
You make a play and this is like either your finisher when you're ahead, or because you have 360 hit points, you go to this guy, Iono to 1, take 2, and then say that you can't deal with a 360 hit point Mon, and like, good luck. So this feels like, if anything, this is like a one-of in a Gardevoir EX toolbox where you still have all the 1 prizes and stuff, but then when your opponent's down to 1 or 2 prizes, you go, well... This is my biggest guy. Here it comes, and I'm just gonna slam KOs. Like, we don't really care about overflowing wishes. That's like a panic situation if you've got nothing else going on. Sure, but I think the Symphonia gives you like that backdoor win con into stuff. Yeah,
we were saying today as we were traveling that I feel like Scoop Up Cyclone as an ace spec just is going to. Shoot up like the tier list, right? Like Archaludon famously playing it right now, but to like have Mega Gardevoir like take a hit, for example, and say, hey, you know what, I'll go with that Iono play you mentioned before. Let me reestablish my Gardevoir, send all the damage back, then Iono, then you have to deal with 360 HP with an Iono to 1, and what are the chances that you're going to be able to like either find Gus to take that, but like you said with the prize mapping, it's going to be like that 1-2-3 combo. You're not going to be able to take 3 prizes unless there's like a mega damaged Gardevoir EX or something like that.
Yeah, it's this is a crazy card, and Gardevoir, like you said, because it can still use those Scream Tails and the other stuff.
And
the monkeys, you can set up the KO for like you're KOing Fez, you're doing Iono, you've got 360 hit points, good luck. Like, I'm winning next turn if you can't beat this huge wall in front of you.
Yeah, I think for me, as like the newer player in the room and the newer caster in the rotation, it's not the 3 prizes that bothers me because I've been through that before. It's how overtuned Gardevoir EX is now. Like, Gardevoir EX, everyone says like, oh, well, it's gone now. Who cares? It's never gone. And now it has this insanely broken card. Like, you're only losing Refinement, and Refinement, of course, is a big part of that deck. But you have to look at, like, the queen of the deck right here. Mega Gardevoir is insanely broken.
Yeah, that card's so good. Yeah, these are pretty absurd.
I don't think we're doomed, though. I think
No.
it's very easy to, like, go on Twitter. Everyone is freaking out. It's the game's ruined. I'm quitting. And it's just like, we've seen 2 of these. We've seen 2. We have, trainers, Pokemon still coming down the line. This is from your experience with, like, set releases. This isn't going to come out for quite some time, right?
No.
Because they announced A-Specs, like, what? Like, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Something like that. So, I mean, we'll see, but I have a gripe with Gardevoir at this point because it's just clearly everyone's favorite over there, and we just need something else to have a turn.
Yeah, that could be the twilight of Gardevoir as well, though. Like, that could be the back end of... Well, I guess we'll have it for even another year. But yeah, what's interesting is... So, what my hope is that there's going to be a number of decks like Gardevoir, in that you get to just add in one Mega as, like, your... This is like your
Finisher,
ace or whatever, your finisher.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And then there's going to be decks like Lucario where it's more all-encompassing. And it's like, I have to play my 3 prizes as my multi-prizes, and I don't even have any 2 prizes in the deck. Because I think that will create interesting lines of prize mapping. And I also think that because you're utilizing 3 prizes, especially if you're like the Lucario deck, you probably can't play Fez, Squawk, Mew. You can't play any of those cards because it gives the opponent the easy win con of like, that one Riolo I took really mattered a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like putting that Fez down, I then have to pick it up or something like that. Otherwise, it's just one Lucario down and I'm done.
You know what I just realized? Rigid Band also works on this because it's a stage 1.
Yes.
Oh no!
It can be even bigger. It can. Yeah.
You can Arvin for Rigid Band and the Gatorade shake. This is... we're so good!
Yeah, the stats are pretty silly.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, we're on Poke Beach just checking this stuff out. But
Shout out to Poke Beach.
That's more or less what we had on Megas. Like we said, not Doomsday. I much prefer them to VMAXs, so don't panic about the VMAX era. I think I do prefer them. I certainly prefer them to old Megas, even that like old Megas were just whatever.
Yeah.
Like I hated the deck building where I had to play 4 Spirit Links in a deck where I just wanted to Mega my one guy, and I hated having to like. The good news is about that format was there was just so much search and draw that you would find a Spirit Link and evolve like all the time. If you didn't, you had like you've whiffed crazily, and it just led to feels bad. But essentially, all it did was shoehorn 4 cards that are dead into your deck just to play the game if you wanted to play a Mega, which was just like so bad. And tag teams is nothing like this either. Like it's just not tag teams in any which way. We're not going to see basic Megas, so it's like fine, unless we see like. Well, I guess you could just put down a 3 prize Mega Absol or something like, for example, right? Couldn't you? I guess you could. Oh, that's pretty scary actually. I was expecting. I said to myself, I was just thinking now that it would all be basics, but I suppose because we're not having to go from Absol to Mega, it would just be, here's my basic 3 prize Mega. Enjoy. Okay, so maybe there are some tag team elements then, if there are going to be some all 3 prize builds. Yeah, that's not going to go down well.
Get your Professor Turo scenarios right now.
Get your full art churros. Pick up a Cyclone if you haven't.
Yeah, definitely.
What else? Stuff like Count's Catcher is like always good.
Don't panic.
Don't panic.
You're going to play the game, don't worry. Give it a chance. We don't know.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I people are more panicking in that it looks like a U-turn in design choice, but I think that these are so much better thought out than the the predecessors of 3 prizes. That even though it says the number 3, these feel right now like better decisions.
Sure.
So yeah, don't panic. That's our advice. Cool.
Just wait.
And yeah, 3 prizes are back.
Rigid Band, Powerade.
There it is, the combo.
That's my combo. I'm not playing that deck though. This might be the deck that forces me to play Guardy.
Wow.
Because that second attack is so good considering what we know.
Yeah, insane.
Insanity.
All right, we're going to head off. Those are our thoughts. Let us know what your thoughts are on the initial release and after you've heard us yabber about the predecessors and how it's going to look in the future. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be back soon. Cheers.